Time for us to take a look at the dailies on Daybreak. As usual, we'll begin with the Daily Trust newspaper, where you have the lead story that talks about the palliative saga. It says Tinubu's 57.8 billion naira rice palliative raises dust. Constituents accuse legislators of hoarding. How we lobbied presidency for it. Reps speaking, and then also Senate silent on Lagis. All the details on page 4. Now, you find an infograph there showing you reported Tinubu's palliatives since assumption of office. You have 50% slash on bus transportation during the Yuletide season, which many people, if you ask, they haven't seen really. You have other interventions like the free train services during the Yuletide season, 100 million naira worth of palliatives to each House of Representatives member, 200 million naira worth of palliatives to each senator. You have 35,000 naira provisional wage award for civil servants for 2 months. Is it 2 months or 3 months? I recall the president talk about 3 months, but these are some of the interventions. You have also 185 billion naira shared to 36 states and the FCT as palliatives. You have zero customs duty and VAT on CNG conversion kits imports, rice distribution to governors for sharing in states, 25,000 conditional cash transfer to vulnerable Nigerians. These are some of the interventions that we've seen under the current administration in the past few months since assumption of office. Below that, you have President orders probe of humanitarian ministries scandals on page 3. These are the main stories on the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper today.
All right, let's take a look at the Guardian newspaper this morning. The major story here says federal government in fiscal dilemma over high inflation, low revenue and FX crisis. Below there we see the inflation rate is at 28.2%. The budget is 28.7 trillion naira. Below that, we have the Pope Francis approval of same-sex blessing. As a dive more deeper insight into that, you can find that on the editorial page of page 12. CBN pays airlines additional $61.64 million stock funds. You find that on page 2. Towards an inclusive society for people living with disabilities. Tinubu orders probe of Edu humanitarian ministry over 37 billion naira and 535 million naira funds. 5 dead, 30 others rescued as boats capsizes in River Niger. We have 3.4 billion naira debt. Oil AG faults Makinde's paucity of funds claim. Worsening insecurity, Ayaoku blames killings on non-prosecution of perpetrators. Indeed, PDP accuses Kwara senators and reps of diverting the federal government's rice. You find that story on page 30. Also, Supreme Court affirms states have no regulatory powers on inland waterways. Now, these are some of the stories that you'd find on the Guardian newspaper today.
All right. So let's take a look at the Daily Sun newspaper. You have the lead story there. It says, alleged funds diversion. FG probes Beta Edu. Vows to unravel details of financial mismanagement by humanitarian minister. You have, as fresh document reveals, she approved 3.1 million naira for flight tickets, airport taxes to Kogi State without airport. PDP calls for sack. Serap threatens court action. You have also other stories. How Kanu can be speedily released. Deputy Speaker. You also have Forex probe. EFCC's raid designed to cause unwarranted embarrassment. That says Dangote. Ayoku. FG must stop killings. CBN spends $2 billion to settle FX forwards. Foreign airlines get $61.64 million. NDLEA naps female bandits a supply with cash of ammunition, 11 others over 3 tons of illicit drugs. 5 die in Anambra boat mishap, 30 rescued. Naira scarcity persists, inflation soars. Nigerians groan over high prices of food, medicines, others. Supreme Court affirms FG's exclusive control of inland waterways. So these are the main stories on Daily Sun newspaper.
Let's move to the Nation front page. The top of the page there says President orders probe of alleged 545 million naira fraud in the Humanitarian Affairs Ministry. EFCC didn't take any documents away from our office, says Dangote. The foreign airlines get $61.64 million forex backlog. Supreme Court, waterways belong to the federal government. You find that on page 7. Below the headmaster, we have Tinubu approves 12 billion naira outstanding payments to Super Eagles and others. The major story here says 21 governorship appeals for hearing at Supreme Court this week. Adebutu versus Abiodun to come up on Thursday. Judgment likely on Kano and Lagos on Friday. Below that, there's Victoria. Below the Victoria, we have foreign investors double stakes in Nigerian market. Stock market records largest turnover in 3 years. The state's federal government on collision course over shareholding in oil firms. NGF-DG governors always kept in the dark. That's according to him. At the belt there, it says police targets 59 billion naira from vehicle registration and Lagos to enforce laws strictly. These are some of the stories on the Nation newspaper this morning.
All right. So let's take a look at the National Economy newspaper, where you have the lead story there talks about declining petroleum production, how Nigeria can end oil theft, vandalism in 2024, says expert. You have, well, that's mainly the story there. You have below there, 6 notable visa policy shifts affecting Nigerians from January. That's that for the National Economy.
All right, let's move to Business Day newspaper this morning. Nigeria's debt to hit 95 trillion naira, up 8-fold in 10 years. This is the major story on the Business Day. It says federal government borrows 2.9 trillion naira from CBN under Tinubu. Block tax loopholes to boost revenue, Ruane advises. There's a big story of 3 million bank accounts face sanctions as BVN and NIN deadline nears. Nigerians speak their mind on Dangote headquarter raids. You find Nigerians' opinion on page 6. What to expect as passport automation takes off today. No accusation of wrongdoing made against us, says Dangote. We have beside that picture there, it says inside the Afrexim Bank NNPC $3.2 billion loan. Now, these are some of the stories on the Business Day newspaper this morning.
All right, well, that's that for the newspapers this morning. Let's get some perspectives on the stories. We have Suleiman Ubagaya, CEO, Sky Limit Media Group, an editor and former deputy president of the Nigerian Guild of Editors, in the studio. Thank you so much for joining us on Daybreak, as always, to review some of the stories.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
All right. You're welcome.
Of course. Let's start, by taking a look at, there's a lot of stories, trending, but then one unification is what is happening in the humanitarian affairs. So we spoke about it, but then briefly, let's hear your take on what is happening with the president giving, a go-ahead of probe for that.
Well, I watched a few moments earlier how you were able to dissect the issue with the guest that just left a few moments ago. And I will first of all commend the presidency for accepting to probe one of their own, that is the current Minister for Humanitarian Affairs, Dr. Beta Edu. It is surprising that since its establishment, barely 5 years ago, The ministry is headed by 2 women in quick succession, starting with Sadia Umar Farouk and now Beta Edu. Somehow, some mischief makers, permit me to put it that way, have been indicting you, the women folk.
It's making us look bad, honestly. Definitely, we feel like that.
I saw one newspaper, I think Daily Asset, coming up with the lead headline that 3 women in that ministry seem to, or allegedly siphoned 87 billion naira. It's an indictment, honestly, for me, not just on the women folk. Of course, I'm sure there are many more women of virtue. So definitely not all women should be seen in that very dark light. So it's a very positive thing that the presidency has accepted to investigate the minister. What remains now is for the government to ensure that the investigation is done holistically and to ensure that there are no sacred cows in the investigation. So I commend the presidency, and I hope the investigation will be honest and just.
That is the most important thing. Yeah. All right, let's take a look at the major story on the Daily Trust newspaper now. It says Tinubu's 57.8 billion naira rice palliative raises dust already. I mean, right when the president made mention of this, Nigerians majority came out to say we do not want this. Instead, put the money, invest it in something that everybody would feel the impact. Because when it comes to these distributions, they've been alleged of how a lot of palliative have been, distributed based on party loyalists and all that. So another aspect, there's also part of hoarding from the people that are supposed to even distribute, where local governments are coming out to say, we don't even know this is going on because we did not receive anything from the state. So what happened? What is happening now that it's already coming out? There's a lot of allegations on this one.
Well, first of all, I'm a subscriber to that school of thought that says government should not be dishing out palliatives, especially because of administration of the distribution process. It has been proven in Nigeria that government after government keep coming up with policies that are aimed at providing relief to the citizenry. But the distribution process has always been the problem. Bado administrations that just ended some months back has spent trillions of naira in palliatives, various forms of palliatives. But the issue is these palliatives have ended up in the pockets of some fat cats in government offices. The Tinubu administration has also, even though it's been seen as a capitalist in nature, has also come up with the same policy of providing palliatives. When the government whips up with a policy that seems to be punitive or maybe permit me to use the word wicked in nature, it also comes up with something that provides relief, It is in reality, while some people are thinking it is a socialist form of governance, the reality is it is purely capitalistic. Only that the government is now probably no longer listening to the dictates of the Bretton Woods institution of World Bank and the IMF, and there are 9 areas that Malam Ayuba has just read out that the government has intervened to make life easier for the citizenry. But the talking specifically about the rice palliative was 57.8 billion naira provided to members of the National Assembly at the rate of 200 million per each senator and 100 million per each House member. There are many ways to look at it. First of all, the legislators have no business whatsoever to lobby the executive arm of government to provide them with any palliative. They have no right to compare themselves with governors. Governors are part of the executive branch of government, even though at the state levels. The presidency is also the executive part of government. Theirs is legislators. They should serve as a check on the executive. So I don't see any reason why they should lobby for it, as the House of Reps spokesman has conceded. And secondly, there is the issue also of, like we mentioned earlier, administration of the distribution. How do you ensure it reaches the people that the whole thing is directed at? That has always been the issue. I'm not sure, if not for the House of Reps member from Esako, who first of all brought this issue to the public glare, I'm not sure Nigerians will even have known what truly transpired. A lot of the House members or the senators may have ended up, diverting this this palliative.
So in this light, we may even say that this is illegal and unconstitutional. Looking at the role that the legislators are supposed to play, like you mentioned, which is more legislative and oversight functions over the executive arm. Now we are seeing lawmakers delving into taking palliatives and distributing same to their constituents, assuming they do so.
No, honestly, it is highly unethical. You can even say it is illegal. It is highly unethical because it's like me serving as a check on you, and lobbying you now, to provide me with, to give me a kind of favor. I'm compromising my principles. I'm giving you the leverage to do whatever you want because knowing very well that the person that should serve as a check on you has already been compromised. So that is simply the fact.
How do you see this reinforcing this politics of stomach infrastructure as it is being coined, in some quarters? How do you see this reinforcing that?
Well, I do not subscribe to that, honestly, because like the Chinese would say, there is this famous Chinese adage that says, teach me how to catch a fish, don't give me fish. By the time you continue to provide stomach infrastructure as it is coined in Nigeria, people will not be able, the beneficiaries will not be able to go out on their own to seek a more sustainable means of livelihood. They may end up depending or relying on such stomach infrastructure at every turn. Of course, life is being made very difficult by government policies like the withdrawal of fuel subsidy. But then, if government will provide palliatives, somehow, of course, palliatives are being provided even in the advanced capitalist economies like America. If you go to the United States, virtually all the states.
But we have a task to think about how it should be done and how it will get to the people intent. I think that's where the major issue.
That's where the major difference is exactly. Our own, any other country, once even 1 naira is provided for the people, it reaches the people. But here in Nigeria, if let's say 100 billion, like this 57.8 billion that has been earmarked for rice, for legislators, let's hope maybe the 7.8 billion naira worth of rice will reach the people. Most likely 50 billion out of this amount will end up in the pockets of
there seems to be a dilemma here. On the one hand, we see the intention of government to cushion the impact of the difficulties, the economic difficulties that Nigerians are experiencing. On the other hand, the question of how to do it is a challenge. So should government, what should government do then, in order to actually, at least ameliorate the sufferings of Nigerians?
Government should continue in the same way it has started, to continue to provide some palliatives. You understand, all the 9 areas, for example, that you read out, that the government has provided palliatives in, are very good. But the issue, like we said earlier, is whether it reaches the downtrodden. It has been proven in Nigeria that it does not. So I think what government needs to do is simply to get the right kind of people who are honest. There are many millions upon millions of Nigerians that are honest, that are upright, who can be saddled with such a responsibility. Government can come up with a committee if it wants, or something, a kind of structure that ensures that once any palliative is provided, it reaches down to the downtrodden members of the society.
All right, let's leave the palliative matter to rest now and move on to other stories. There's a story here that we read earlier saying something along the line of the Supreme Court reaffirming the powers of the federal government to control the inland waterways. And I'm looking at the Daily Sun newspaper, for instance. Just above that story, if you look at the story, it says Supreme Court affirms federal government's exclusive control of inland waterways. But just above that story, you see another story that says 5 people die in Anambra boat mishap, 30 rescued. We know the condition of the waterways in the various states of this country. And don't you think that it's time we perhaps review the laws to even delegate some responsibilities to the states to at least be able to regulate some of these things? Because one of the major reasons why we've seen boat capsizing and some of these accidents where hundreds of people die is because of lack of regulation. You find people in a boat that should convey 50, you find 100 or 150 and so on. Yeah. Those are the stories that we've always heard.
You're completely right. We need to change the law. There are people who believe that the 1999 Constitution that is in operation today needs to be holistically changed for us to make progress in Nigeria as a nation. So many of, that like this issue of exclusive list, of course the issue of inland waterways will not even have been taken up to the Supreme Court because it's very clearly in the exclusive list, very clearly in the Constitution, 1999 Constitution. So I don't see any reason why they even had to take it up to the Supreme Court. Now that the judgment has been passed, the issue is whether it is practical, whether it is going to be of benefit to Nigerians. So that being the case, what is required is for government to simply face reality and come up with changes in the Constitution. There are so many issues. I think our legislators are afraid of holistic changes.
And in this case, it appears as if the federal government is much more concerned about the resource control of the waters rather than the safety on the waters.
Yeah, exactly.
So where do we strike the balance?
No, it's not just resource control that is of interest to the federal government. There is also the issue of national security. And that is why, it is the main reason why inland waterways issues is on the exclusive list. It's going to be it's already a very dicey issue, and it requires intricate balancing.
But would you say NIWA has done its own responsibility, since the inception of this organization regarding the waterways security, safety and all that, for them to earn this Supreme Court's judgment?
Sorry, I didn't get the earlier part of the question.
Okay. I said, would you say that they have, delivered their own responsibility that is expected of them when it comes to the safety?
Definitely not. Definitely not. Talking about security, we've seen a lot of illegal activities taking place in the maritime sector of the economy. Look at oil bunkering, for example. So it's all part of it. Look at kidnappers in some parts of the country using the waterways to carry out their operations and escape. Look at incidences of boat mishap, almost every day taking place in one part of the country or the other. So definitely the government has not played its part.
So how can we empower the NIWA now, for instance, if we are to go by this without delegating the powers to the state? How can we ensure that NIWA, as it is presently constituted, delivers on the mandates and perhaps also take into consideration other issues of safety for people on the waterways?
For me, there are two things. One, government must have the political will to do it right, and secondly, which is also a follow-up to the first one, government must also ensure the right people are appointed at the right places. NIWA should always be headed by people that are truly pro-Nigeria, that are patriotic, and that are ready to execute the mandate.
But there are issues of resources, the issues of funding, for them to even be able to operate. I mean, no matter how morally upright you are, as a government appointee,
that is why I
without
mentioned,
the needed funds.
That is why I mentioned the issue of political will. The government must be ready to roll out resources to make sure the right thing is done, because it is of very fundamental interest to the survival of this country. The maritime industry, our maritime waters, we have not tapped, the endless potential in the maritime industry, and this is all part of it.
When it comes to a lot of things, there's always, we need to have the political will. Where are we selling that will? That way we can, saddle it on and gift it to all our politicians out there, and people, stakeholders in charge of all these things. Well, we hope that all these problems, that are coming out are able to be curbed at the earliest in order for Nigerians at least to feel the impact of the federal government. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Suleiman Obagaya, CEO, Sky Limit Media Group Editor. Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Yeah.